Right.
Good morning and welcome to Joy Factor. My name is Sďwkszyn and I have a very special guest today. Her name is Carollyne Haynes. And Carollyne, I have to read the introduction because, yeah, I'm not good at memorizing things. I'm not an actor, I'm a writer.
I say that too.
Carolyn is a British Canadian writer to whom words are music, and she loves playing with them. Born in Devon, England, where she lived until she was 18, she left for London, England, where she lived for 2 years before immigrating to Canada. She lived in Ottawa for 11 years, during which time she worked at the Conference Board of Canada and for the House of Commons before leaving the workforce to start her family. She spent 4 years in Calgary, Alberta, and she now lives with her husband Jim on Vancouver Island. She has 3 children and 4 grandchildren and feels truly blessed to have all of them. When she's not writing or working in her garden, she and Jim travel extensively. Today, I'm talking to Carolyn about her book, which is also available as an audiobook, Raised by Committee. Links to both versions of the book will be in the description box. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you, Sue. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I will do the land acknowledgement as a matter of ensuring that we promote healing and storytelling for all cultures in Canada. I come to you from the unceded, traditional, and ancestral territories of the Coast Salish people, in particular the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
Thank you. I'm on unceded land too. I wish I could pronounce the name, but I acknowledge that we're on unceded land.
Okay. Are you up in you're up island?
Yes, Qualicum Beach.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
yes, I won't make a mistake and say it wrong.
Okay, yeah, I know. It's so it's like, oh my goodness, I don't want to dishonor to be sure. So,
Mhm.
got the new book out in audiobook, which I believe you recorded yourself, which was sounds like a bit of an adventure.
It was a total adventure, actually, Sue. It started a couple of years ago. I started getting emails from the publishing company I use for Raised by Committee, and they kept saying, "Oh, you need to convert this to an audiobook, it's the way of the future and all that." So I thought, sounds like a good idea, because I actually spent 3 months in England last year, and we get to ride the tube a lot. And it's quite amazing. You get on a tube, and let's say there were 50 people on it, 49 of them had earplugs in. They were listening to their phones. So I thought, maybe audiobooks are the way to go. So the publisher said, "Oh, well, we can convert it for you for $7,000." And I thought, I don't think so. So anyway,
Sure, let me just go into my bank account and give you
yeah,
my
really.
retirement
Oh, hang
savings.
on, I think I've got some change in my back pocket.
It's just
But
lying around.
yeah. So anyway, I let that opportunity go by, and then on
Mhm.
Facebook one time I saw this ad, and usually I ignore Facebook ads, but this one it said audiobooks made easy, an
Mm.
online course for audiobooks. Then I started recording. It was kind of a challenge for me because you don't hear your own voice that often. I
Right.
had been interviewed a couple of times before, but just little snippets. So anyway, I started this routine and I learned the program, and I got into a routine. I would record in the afternoon when it's kind of quiet in the house, not much traffic outside. So I use the afternoons to record. I put a big blanket over my window and door, and I made a little recording studio, a little sound booth. And so I'd record in the afternoon. Then next morning, I would do all the editing on it. And I set myself the goal of a chapter a day, which is,
Wow.
yeah,
That's ambitious.
it was ambitious. It was actually quite draining, time
Mm.
wise, but I'm an A type, double A as my husband calls me. And so anyway, I stuck to this grueling routine, and I got it finished. And
Good for you.
yeah, and then you have to submit. Very happy.
Yes.
And I have another book which I wrote after Raised by Committee, And maybe in the fall, I'll think about doing that one too,
Mm.
doing the audio. That one's fiction.
Okay.
Yeah. But going back to Raised by Committee, actually, I found it at times harder to speak the words than it
Hmm.
was to write them because
Yeah.
it's a deeply personal story.
To be
There's
sure.
some
Yeah.
humor in it, there's some good times and all that stuff, but there's
Mm.
certain parts were kind of difficult. And I got to one bit and I had to start reading, and I thought, oh my God, what was I thinking? Why did I put that in the book? So it's just something I got up to as a teenager. I thought, oh, I could have overlooked that little detail of my sordid youth, my
Oh no,
misspent.
but sordid youths are the best.
I guess
They're,
so.
I mean, you gotta sow your wild seeds, man.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, I got through the process, and it's going to be interesting. See where it leads.
Yeah, so it didn't occur to you to paraphrase or do anything else or
No, I got the impression, because when I sort of signed up to record the book, you have to claim the title, and there's something about it being. I could have made changes, but that would mean a new ISBN number.
mm,
They want the audio to mirror pretty well exactly the ebook, because it's also
okay,
available as an ebook. And
right.
that's one of the details.
Important ones, especially
And actually, the original print version of the book had its own ISBN number.
Mm,
When I released the ebook version, which was like about 3 4 years after the print version came out, and during that time, people that family members and whatever friends that I was in touch with, I'd used what you call it, pseudonyms for these people,
mm,
rather than, because I have brothers and all that, and I was
right.
telling a very personal story. So I thought, well,
Hmm.
maybe they don't want me to be doing this. Well, they didn't mind actually, but I didn't know that at the time. So, but then when the ebook version came out, I put in the real names of places, and you know, so it's a
Oh, okay.
little bit different. So that required a new ISBN number, which is the only reason I bring it up.
Oh,
So
okay. So there was enough change. Sometimes if it's immaterial change, they'll be like, yeah, okay, whatever. But I guess there was enough change. Well,
exactly,
yeah. Well, if you're changing names and places, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Because place is character,
mm-hmm.
as our names. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Interesting. Wow,
Yeah.
fascinating. So, let's create some little interest around uh, your book. And what can you tell us about Raised by Committee? That sounds like it's a fascinating title, and I do know the background. I have,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I called it Raised by Committee because when I was about, I'd retired and I wanted to start writing. I knew that there was a part of my growing up that probably was unique in a certain way, in that when I was 12, I was abandoned. My brothers and I and my sister were abandoned by our mother, and my father started abusing me.
Hmm.
Had been abusing me actually for a year or so. And so the police came, and we were carted off, and I was sent to live in a children's home. And this children's home was run by a committee of people. There were social workers, educational psychologists, the nurse or the matron who ran the home, and all this sort of stuff. So anyway, when I decided to write the story about it, I got in contact with the Devon County Council, who ran the children's home, and said, under the Freedom of Information, can I obtain a copy of my file if you still have it? And this absolutely blew me away, because 50 years after I left there, they still have the file sitting in their basement. So anyway, they said, yes,
That's
I can.
The
Interesting.
generation of record keepers.
Absolutely, yeah, and paper, real paper that you could see.
Oh,
So
yeah, talk to my dad. He's 92. He has boxes and boxes of stuff.
I know I'm trying to get through some of that. Yeah, I need a big bonfire to get rid of some of the stuff. Anyway,
My sisters and I are going to do that one day.
so so I contacted them and they said yes, they had the file. I said, well, I'd like to obtain a copy. And she said, well, I'll get it. So next, and these were letters going back and forth, one
Yeah.
phone call, letters. And she said, well, it's going to take us a couple of weeks. And I said, oh, really? She said, yes, there's 500 pages. We have to go through and redact anything that, you know.
Hmm.
So anyway, within that 2 weeks, I also managed to track down the matron of the children's home, who was 95 by then.
Wow, she was still
And
alive.
I was so thrilled to find her again after all those years, and her second in command, as it were. We called her Auntie Dawn. So
Hmm.
these two ladies ran the children's home. And anyway, I was so excited to find them and to know I was going to get this file that Jim and I flew back to England and met with them
Wow.
at the file. And like I say, I read it cover to cover, and I was quite. It was a real eye opener, Sue, because you know I'd sort of suppressed a lot of the memories. Okay, I grew up in a children's home and like I'd put all that behind me.
Yeah.
I was really stunned and moved to read this file and learn how much work had been going on behind the scenes. Um, I ran away several times.
Mm.
Hitchhiked the length of England in search of my mother, dead of night, could have been raped and murdered and left in the ditch. Um, so I did some pretty crazy things, but they were always there. They picked me up and put me back on the path, and I was also very lucky in that I had passed. I was going to grammar school. I don't, it's not quite the same here. But anyway, I was a
Hmm.
grammar school student, and one of my biggest concerns when the family broke up and I was taken was that I wouldn't be able to continue my grammar school education.
Mm.
They made sure I did. They made sure they sent me to a home that was near a grammar school.
Mm.
So anyway, it was really something because by then I had raised three children myself, so I knew how difficult teenagers could be.
Right.
And so I wrote the book not as a poor me, look what happened to me. Oh, I was, oh, none of that, none of that.
Right.
It's a, oh my God, I'm so grateful I was rescued from a bit of a shithole, to be honest with you,
Right.
rescued and put into a children's home. So I was raised by a committee.
Yeah, and raised by sounds like some very thoughtful and
Yeah.
well purposeful and loving people that understood your needs and understood that you weren't a bad kid and despite, some of your behavior,
Awesome. Yeah.
we
I,
you,
there's a line in the book which I actually remember saying like a social worker used to come and visit me pretty well every month, just see how I was going, how I was coping. Um, but and she was telling me one time I wanted to do something. She said, "Well, I'm going to have to check with the committee," and I got really irritated. And I said, "Oh, this darn committee! They're just an impediment to my social life." And so, but they were actually protecting me. So yeah. Anyway, it was good. It was good.
yes. And now that you know that,
Yeah.
now in hindsight, as a mother, you definitely know what that is.
And actually, talking of that, what sort of started stirring all this up was my daughter. I have two boys and then a daughter. And I was out hiking one day with a friend, and my daughter and her friend were skipping ahead of us on the trail. It was a beautiful sunny afternoon. And I don't know what brought it on, but I just happened to be watching her. I thought, oh, isn't that sweet and everything? And it was like a 2x4 hit me. Because I suddenly looked at her and I thought, oh my God, I was that age when my father started abusing me. And
Mm,
it was up until then, I think I'd really been suppressing all that. I
mm,
just that was then, this is now. But it really it opened me up to a huge wound. And so I started, doing some counseling and things like that. And anyway, so then the book, when I wrote the book, in fact, Peter, someone who interviewed me last week, he said, how did you feel after you did it? And the word I came up with was authentic. I didn't feel I was pretending to be someone I wasn't anymore.
Right.
Like, oh, this is me. I am,
Yeah. The mask had come off.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was able to just, I don't know what the word is. I feel like I'm not holding my breath all the time. I haven't got all this stuff down inside of me,
Right. There was the great release.
It was, yes, yes. And a little bit scary. And in fact, before I let the book get published, I sent a copy to my son, my eldest son, and said, you have the say on this. If you are not comfortable with this getting out there, say the word. And he said no, and he encouraged me to keep going,
You raised a good man, Carolyn.
Yeah, really, really. Anyway, it was a good process, painful process, actually. But it's sort of like when you're having stitches pulled out. Sure, it hurts for a moment, but then, gone, all better.
Well, and that's the emotional healing process, I think, is something we don't really necessarily talk about.
Right. Yeah.
In society. Like usually that's done definitely behind closed doors, as it should be, because it needs to, you need that time and space.
Yes.
And you need those private conversations to process all of that stuff. And then after the fact, when you're able to write it down, it's because you've already done that work.
Right. Yes.
And yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your story. I think there's so many people that could benefit from that. And
are you familiar with the organization? I know they're here in Canada, and I think they're in the States too, maybe even England. It's called Little Warriors.
Yes.
Yes. Anyway, they had Raised by Committee on their recommended reading list. So,
great.
Because it addresses the emotional healing, and in fact, yeah, it was good. It was good.
Yeah. And if anybody's listening that's been through trauma and hasn't received counseling or reached out to a therapist in any way, please reach out to a professional who can help and guide you through some conversations and lead you to your healing.
Exactly. And it's hard. It's hard,
It is hard work. Yeah. And it's tough. And how your family received the book well and
well, yes and no.
okay.
Yes, I still have family in England who are in total denial.
Okay.
They,
yeah.
Because my grandparents were well respected in Tiverton, the town I'm from, and it just, they're English. They have stiff upper lips. Whatever you do, don't say that.
Talk about it.
Talk about it. Just pretend
everything stays behind closed doors, don't you know?
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I've had cousins. They've all read it. They're all accepting of it and all that. I have cousins in the States who read it. They feel the same way about it. But there's a couple of them in England who would still like to pretend that it never happened. So
well, that's that's their journey.
Absolutely, they have to.
Yeah, that's their journey. Your husband was
he was all in. He was aware of it, and because I took this writing course, and I said I want to write a book. When I retired, right? I said I haven't really settled on what the book should be about. And he said, "Well, you had a pretty interesting childhood." I said, "No, I don't really want to write about that." And and he said, "No, don't write about that. But you had the interesting childhood. write about what happened after. So,
Mm,
and that was his after the police came. So that's where the
right.
story starts. The story
Okay.
starts when the police come. So,
Yeah. I need to wrap things up here, Carolyn.
hey, Sue. Wow, I hardly gave you a minute to talk.
Oh, that's okay. I was here to talk about you and your book. That's what we're here for. I don't need to talk. They hear me talking all the time on this channel.
There you go. Well,
Thank you so much for being my guest. It was a great pleasure to speak
having
to you.
me. Thank you for having me.
Of
Take care.
course. And we'll see you around in the ethers.